This happened last year, one of the scariest nights of my life, and honestly, it still freaks me out thinking about it. I was home alone for the weekend. My parents were out of town visiting some relatives, and my sister was away at college, so it was just me in the house. We live in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood, and nothing like this ever happens where we live. It was a Friday night, and I didn't have any plans, so I figured I'd just hang out, watch some movies, and relax. By around 11 p.m., I was lying on the couch in the living room, halfway through a movie, when I heard something coming from the kitchen. It sounded like a soft tapping, maybe the sound of a branch brushing against the window or something. I tried to ignore it at first, thinking it was nothing, but then, a few minutes later, the tapping got louder. It was clear now. It wasn't a branch. It was a distinct sound, like someone was knocking on the window. I paused the movie and sat up, trying to listen carefully. It was definitely coming from the back of the house, where the kitchen and back door are. Feeling uneasy, I grabbed my phone and slowly walked toward the kitchen. The house was completely dark, except for the light from the TV in the living room. I didn't turn any lights on, thinking maybe I'd just scare myself if I did. When I got closer to the kitchen, I froze. There was a shadow outside the window near the back door. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, maybe a reflection from the street light outside. But then I realized there was someone standing just outside the door, motionless. My heart started pounding in my chest. It was too dark to make out any details, but I could see the outline of a figure standing right outside the glass door that leads to the backyard. I didn't know what to do. My immediate thought was to run, but I didn't want to make any noise. I crouched down behind the kitchen island, trying to stay out of sight, and dialed 911. As I was talking to the operator, I could hear a faint scraping sound, like someone was fiddling with the door handle. I peeked over the counter just in time to see the handle jiggle slightly, like they were testing to see if the door was locked. Thankfully, it was. The operator stayed on the phone with me, telling me to remain calm and stay hidden while they sent a patrol car. My heart was racing and I could barely breathe as I tried to listen to what was happening outside. I heard more faint tapping on the glass and then... nothing. It went silent. I didn't dare move, just crouched there, gripping my phone and waiting for the police to arrive. A few minutes passed, and then I heard the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate steps moving away from the back door. I didn't want to look, but I forced myself to peek through the kitchen window. That's when I saw him. A man was walking through my backyard, casually, like he had all the time in the world. He was tall, dressed in dark clothes, and had something in his hand. A crowbar, maybe? He walked around the side of the house, disappearing from view, but I could hear his footsteps crunching on the gravel as he moved toward the front of the house. My blood went cold. I realized he might be heading for the front door. I bolted back to the living room, checking to make sure the front door was locked, and just as I reached it, I heard the front doorknob rattle. He was trying to get in. My heart was racing so fast, I thought I might pass out. I leaned against the door, holding my breath, hoping the police would show up before this guy got in. The rattling stopped and everything went quiet again. I listened, straining to hear any movement outside, but it was dead silent. Then, out of nowhere, there was a loud bang on the door like he was hitting it with something. I jumped back, terrified, clutching my phone like it was my lifeline. The banging came again, harder this time, and I knew if he kept it up he could probably break the door down. Just when I thought I was out of options, I heard the faint sound of sirens in the distance. The banging stopped. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps retreating quickly from the front porch and through the window. I saw the shadowy figure dart into the woods behind my house. The police arrived a couple of minutes later, and I explained everything to them. They searched the area but didn't find the guy. They said he was probably trying to break in to rob the house and took off when he heard the sirens. I didn't sleep that night, or the next night for that matter. Even though they assured me he was gone, I couldn't shake the feeling that he might come back. I've never felt truly safe in my house since then, especially when I'm home alone. To this day, I have no idea who that man was or what he really wanted, but the image of him standing outside my back door, just watching, still haunts me. Before we jump into the next story, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel It really helps me out and supports what I do here. Thanks. It was just supposed to be a normal weekend night. My boyfriend was out of town for work, so I was home alone, catching up on a movie and trying to relax. I live in a fairly isolated area, just a couple of neighbors scattered down the road, but none close enough to see into my backyard. Around midnight, I decided to head to bed. I locked the doors, checked the windows, and turned off the lights. As I climbed into bed, I noticed something strange. My bedroom window faces the backyard, and there, just beyond the tree line, I saw a faint light. It looked like someone had a flashlight. It flickered for a second, then disappeared. I told myself it was nothing. Probably one of the neighbors, maybe their kid, messing around. Still, it unsettled me enough that I found myself watching the yard more closely, waiting for another sign of movement. Nothing. After a while, I forced myself to relax, telling myself I was overreacting. I must have fallen asleep at some point, but a few hours later, I woke up with a start. The room was completely dark except for a small glow. I blinked, trying to adjust my eyes to the darkness. Then I saw it, a face, pressed up against the window staring at me. I froze, my brain not fully comprehending what I was seeing. For a split second I thought I was still dreaming, but I wasn't. There was a man outside my window, staring into my room, his breath fogging up the glass. His eyes were wide and unblinking, and the sight of him sent a surge of fear through my body. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing my phone with shaking hands. I didn't want to move too quickly, afraid that if I startled him, he might break the window and get inside. As quietly as I could, I called 911, whispering my address and explaining that there was a man outside my window. The dispatcher told me to stay calm, that officers were on their way, but I was anything but calm. I kept my eyes on the man, who hadn't moved. He just stood there, watching me, his face pressed against the glass. I didn't know what he wanted, and the fear of that unknown was worse than anything. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours, and I heard the distant sound of sirens. The man finally moved, his head snapping toward the noise. He gave me one last look, and then he disappeared into the darkness. I could hear the sound of his footsteps fading away as he ran into the trees. When the police arrived, they searched the property but didn't find him. They told me it was likely someone passing through, but that didn't ease my fear. That man wasn't just passing through. He had been watching me, waiting for the right moment. I installed cameras the next day, but I never felt truly safe in that house again. I was never one to get paranoid easily. My friends always joked that I had nerves of steel, but that changed one night when I started getting phone calls from a blocked number. It began like any other night. I was home alone, my roommate was out of town, and I was scrolling through social media when my phone buzzed. I was getting annoyed. Who the hell had time for this? I decided to ignore it, but the calls kept coming. After about the fifth call, I picked up again, ready to yell at whoever was on the other end. But this time, it wasn't just breathing. "I'm watching you." That was all the voice said. It was a man's voice, low and flat. It sent a chill down my spine. I tried to sound tough, to act like I wasn't scared, but my voice wavered as I demanded to know who was calling. Click. The line went dead. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing. Was this someone I knew? A prank gone too far? I tried to think of anyone who might mess with me like this, but no one came to mind. That's when the phone rang again. "I'm outside." This time the voice was closer, more urgent. I ran to the window, my heart pounding in my chest. I scanned the street, the driveway, but everything looked normal. There was no one out there, at least that I could see. I dialed 911, my hands shaking as I explained what was happening. The operator stayed on the line with me until officers arrived, but they didn't find anything. No one lurking around, no suspicious cars. They told me it was probably some sick prank, and left after a thorough check of the property. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I didn't sleep that night, jumping at every little sound, every creak of the house. A few days later, my roommate returned, and things seemed to go back to normal. But the calls never really stopped. Every now and then, I'd get one, always from a blocked number, always breathing, always watching. I had been living in my new house for about 6 months. It was a quiet neighborhood, perfect for someone like me who liked their space and solitude. The house itself was nothing special. A two-story with an attic that I never really used. I wasn't the type to store a bunch of old junk, and I figured I'd never have a reason to go up there. In fact, I had only been up once when I first moved in, just to check it out. It all started with a noise. At first I thought it was just the house settling. An old place like this was bound to creak. But the sound was different, more deliberate. It sounded like someone moving, shifting something heavy across the floor, coming from above me. I dismissed it for days, telling myself it was nothing. But every night, around the same time, I would hear that noise again. It was faint, almost like scraping, like someone was walking around up there. The idea of someone in my attic seemed absurd, so I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to my imagination. But then it got worse. I moved through the house, turning on lights as I went. When I reached the hallway leading to the attic, I stopped dead in my tracks. The attic door, the one that I hadn't touched in months, was slightly open, just enough to notice. My heart was pounding as I grabbed a flashlight. I told myself I had to check it out. I couldn't just leave it. Slowly, I pulled the attic door fully open and pointed the flashlight up into the darkness. The beam of light shook in my trembling hand. As I stepped onto the first stair, I heard something that nearly stopped my heart. A creak, like someone shifting their weight. My blood ran cold. There was someone up there. I backed down the stairs, barely breathing, and ran to the kitchen to grab my phone. I dialed 911, whispering frantically to the operator that I thought there was an intruder in my house. The police arrived within minutes, but it felt like hours. They searched the house, and when they finally went up into the attic, what they found made my stomach turn. In the far corner, hidden behind some old boxes, was a small sleeping bag. There were empty food wrappers, a bottle of water, and a makeshift pillow. Someone had been living in my attic, watching me, moving through the house when I wasn't there. The police said it looked like whoever had been up there had been squatting for a while. Weeks, maybe months. I had been living my life completely unaware that someone was just above me, waiting for me to leave each day so they could come down and who knows what. I moved out the next day.